Well, just days after President Trump blocked Broadcom's $130 billion bid or so for Qualcomm, sources say that ex-chairman Paul Jacobs is seeking funds for a buyout of the chip maker. We've talked about that already, but our next guest says the real challenges facing Qualcomm, and the actual serious ones, might not be buyouts, but are about Apple. Joining us now here at Post 9, Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times columnist Jim Stewart. You spent some time in an area that both John and I have spent a lot of time on, this enduring litigation between Apple and Qualcomm, which does come back to the fore now that Broadcom is off to the side.
Yeah, well, I was very surprised. I was talking to one of Qualcomm's largest shareholders, Jerry Dodson, who runs Parnassus Endeavor, and I figured, like other shareholders, he was in it as a takeover play, and with that over, he'd be crushed. You know, the stock took a big hit this week. He was totally unruffled. He said, no, I'm not in there. I didn't care about the Broadcom bid. In fact, I agree with Trump's decision to squelch it. I'm in there on fundamental reasons because of the Apple feud, which has, it has so many tentacles in it at this point, and it's so complicated. But ultimately, it's about money. And I found it totally fascinating that even though they're bitterly at odds in the courtroom, Apple is still buying Qualcomm chips, still using Qualcomm chips, refusing to pay the license fee, and Qualcomm is still supplying them. It's a very unusual feud.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, I mean, I always point this out. Technically, it's not Apple. It is the suppliers to Apple who have the actual arrangements with the licensing agreements with Qualcomm who've stopped paying. But obviously, they've done it because Apple. But they're just caught in the middle.
We all know it's really about Apple.
And everybody's suing everybody all over the world.
And there are all these regulatory investigations as well. So it's got to be a patent lawyer's, nirvana, and the amount of money that's being spent on all this. But I think what he was saying, what I've heard from other investors as well, is that sooner or later, Apple is going to pay something for all of this, and that'll be a big boost to Qualcomm. The stock is trading at very, very low multiple to what regularized revenues would be. And, it's in everybody's interest to bury the hatchet on this. I mean, everybody's standing on principle here, but really it's just about money and what is going to be a fair, so-called fair value. That should be fought out in the marketplace, not in the courtroom.
But the principle part is interesting because it goes right to the core of what these companies believe about themselves. Apple believes that their software and design and their innovation just makes their products worth that much more, and so they're loath to hand over a percentage of that to Qualcomm. Qualcomm believes their deep research and development makes markets available to everyone else, and so everybody needs to pay. Qualcomm argues Apple isn't paying the raw percentage on its phones anyway. They had cut some kind of deal.
They cut deals.
Who ends up buckling in the end when both have so much money?
Well, they both do have a point, and that's why it ought to be somewhere in the middle. I'll be the mediator here. It should come down somewhere in the middle. I think Qualcomm has a point. Their argument, they take a percentage of the total handset cost. That's the big sticking point. And they say, well, it's our technology that enables Apple to put all these bells and whistles on there, and so we ought to share on a piece of that by taking a percentage. Apple says, well, a lot of what we put on there has nothing to do with the Qualcomm chips. So why should we have to pay a percentage of that? And by the way, when they charge a percentage of the total price, and we're the high cost, high retail priced handset, they're subsidizing the Chinese competitors that Trump claims to be so upset about, who are using exactly the same Qualcomm chip, but charge way less for the total phone. I think that is a pretty persuasive argument, and Apple has been winning the regulatory battle around the world. It may take a few more court rulings to bring them to the table, but as I said, they both have some merits to their argument. So can't they just sit down and hammer out a deal?
Well, then what's a reasonable price to pay by Apple?
Exactly what price is being paid, nobody knows. For example, Samsung, the big competitor to Intel, they renegotiated the deal with Qualcomm. Samsung had been at odds with them as well. Somehow they worked out an arrangement. Nobody knows exactly what it is, but they kept the principle. Qualcomm is still getting a percentage of the total price, but there's other, we don't know what the other things are. They're probably making it financially beneficial for
Qualcomm
Samsung.
has said if they were able to reach a similar deal with Apple, they would be easily able to reach the targets they put out there for their earnings in 2020.
Yeah, and they told Dodson that they actually offered Apple the same deal that Samsung got, and the Apple turned it down. Apple won't confirm that.
Finally, that we brought this up as well, Qualcomm now many view as a national champion given what has happened in terms of the national security concerns that were cited by CFIUS for turning down the Broadcom or preventing it from occurring. Doesn't that in some ways say, hey, the U.S. government also encourages you, Apple, to not really do too much that would be bad to our national champion?
That's true, but I think you've got to be careful what you wish for here. I mean, once the United States government starts seeing Qualcomm as a national champion, and one of the arguments of the government is, oh, they spend so much money on R&D, we want to keep them doing that to advance our interest in the 5G race. Well, really, Qualcomm should be spending R&D for the benefit of the shareholders, and not just to prove some, wave the U.S. flag around over the 5G technology thing, but make intelligent decisions that yield returns. And I hope that's what they're doing. But once they've accepted this, oh, we're acting in the national interest argument, then the question to me is, well, are you also acting in the interest of shareholders?
Yeah,
that's a tricky one.
It's a dangerous road. Jim, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.